Hello and welcome back to a new episode of Everything Phil Collins. I'm Scott, and today we're going to talk about the song After the Ordeal, which is an instrumental track from the album Selling England by the Pound. It comes after the Battle of Epping Forest and just before the cinema show. And we're going to talk about how the band feels about this song. We're going to talk about how the general public feels about the song. It's probably one of the least discussed tracks in the Genesis world. In fact, we're going to do an episode real soon about the best Genesis instrumentals. And when it comes to album instrumentals, I feel like this is even one of the least talked about Genesis instrumentals. There's more discussion about Los Endos or the Brazilian. However, going back over this song for today's episode, I'm realizing this is the perfect song. It's perfect, and it's perfect for what it does. And I think when Tony over the years has criticized this song, I think he's missing the point of what this song actually does. Is it a good song? Is it a good composition? Yeah, it's good. But it's almost a little bit more of a utility song. It serves as like an intermission or like a sip of wine in between courses on a good meal. Ironically, it's called After the Ordeal when it's before what I would consider to be the best and the biggest song on Selling England by the Pound, which is the cinema show. Apparently, there was a battle between Tony and Peter over should this song be included. Apparently, Tony didn't want the song on. Peter was kind of indifferent. Obviously, he doesn't sing on it. There's no lyrics. He didn't really care much for this song either way. He wasn't necessarily advocating for it, but he wanted a part of cinema show, some of the bigger instrumental parts to be cut out. And Tony wasn't having that. And so they kind of compromised with Tony allowing this song so that Peter would allow the cinema show to be played in full. Allegedly. It's also a big favorite of Steve. Now, I believe this is a quasi-composition between Steve and Mike, I believe. And maybe I'm just projecting that because the song is divided into two. We have this nylon string classical composition, and then we have this more rock-ish electric guitar where the drums kick in. Like I said, my personal opinion of this track is completely irrelevant, indifferent. It's a good track, but it serves a purpose. It really resets the palette between Epping Forest, which is chaotic and crazy, and the cinema show, which is fantastic, but also epic and somewhat crazy. In fact, I think this whole album is chocked full of bangers. And so you need songs like this and More Fool Me. You need these songs, and I suppose the last track as well, as a way to just kind of rest things. I mean, what would happen if you replaced After the Ordeal with a song like In the Cage or The Lamb or Carpet Crawlers, or you were to replace More Fool Me with something like Watcher of the Skies? It would make this album a little bit too much. It would make it like a greatest hits album. To me, it's like an opening banger. Then you have like their kind of pop banger, and I Know What I Like. And you have Firth of Fifth, and of course, Cinema Show and Battle is a big song as well. I mean, you have all of these really, really, really big songs. You need these moments where you just kind of reset and get ready for the next big epic. I think if we were to have big 7 to 9 minute epics all in a row, with one or two pop songs, I'm not complaining, but I think that these songs serve a really good purpose. Like I mentioned, the song is divided into two. You have this what Tony calls pseudo-classical, but I really find that both of these songs, which are two parts brought together seamlessly into one, are like a precursor for some of the indie folk alternative music that we would hear 30, 40 years later from bands like Fleet Foxes or Grizzly Bear. And then the back half of the song is almost like reminiscent of or I should say prophetic of what would become indie rock and emo, these slowcore, down-tempo songs where the drums are dragging and bigger drum sounds, and these kind of more drawn-out slide and distorted guitar solos. I mean, you can hear a lot of like modern indie rock, or certainly the indie rock from the 2000s, influenced by this music in the 70s. Now, I think Tony's problem with this song and calling it pseudo-classical comes from the fact that he might be reflecting on it a few years later into the early 80s. You would never hear a song like this on Duke or Abacab. So maybe he's thinking that it's not good enough to be considered a classical song like the classical music he would do more recently. But I don't think we look at it that way. We look at it as it's almost like a DIY indie version of classical music. It's not trying to be one of the classical greats. As I said, this album and all of the other songs cannot exist without After the Ordeal. or More Fool Me. They are like Fraps and Friends. They're like Horizons. They are an opportunity for the listener to reset and to get ready for what comes next. I think it's theatrical, it's cinematic, it's very, very important. This album, which we haven't done a review on, and by the way, make sure you subscribe because very soon, perhaps even next week, I've got a big review coming out of the Selling England by the Pound acoustic series, the 75th anniversary from Atlantic Records, the double disc. I got a copy. We're going to open it up. And we're going to take a listen and we're going to compare it to other mixes. So make sure you subscribe for that. This album, as I uncover more and more people's opinions, I think when you take out some of the 80s and 90s fans, because we did a poll recently, when you include all of the fans from the late 60s all the way to the late 90s, and you rate every album on a scale of 1 to 10, the album with the kind of the highest aggregate score was A Trick of the Tail. And I think that's because it sits on the bridge between the Peter era and the Phil era. When you kind of take away maybe the considerations for the Phil era only fans, you're left with Selling England being the favorite album by most people in that range between Trespass and, let's say, Duke, maybe. It really is a fantastic album. It's probably one of the albums, too, that most fans of prog or fans of just classic 70s rock appreciate and would have in their collection. Same with maybe Duke. Even if you're not a massive Genesis fan where you have everything in their catalog, you probably have a copy of Selling England. You probably have a copy of Duke. It's a great album. It pains me that Tony doesn't appreciate the album for what it is, but it's a great album. And I think After the Ordeal is an essential part of this record. I love Genesis instrumentals. We'll do an episode very soon on Genesis instrumentals. And After the Ordeal is great and serves a really, really good purpose. Let me know in the comments what you think of this song. Do you agree with me that it serves as this intermission, as this little sip of wine in between food courses? Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.